I'm here with Jordan Chariton, a journalist and founder of the new media outlet Status Coup, and he is here to talk about what he's now doing and some of his investigative reporting concerning water stories that the mainstream press just isn't covering today that they should be covering. So Jordan, I'm excited for you because you're launching a huge media organization. Tell us what that is.
Yeah, so it's definitely not launched yet, but I released the name. I'm kind of in the grassroots groveling stage to try to get funding. But we're Status Coup is the name. I kind of want to represent to think we have a status quo in the country that is essentially, the media, the lobbyists, the banks, the corporations, and it's all one big cabal, I would say. It's kind of a journalistic coup d'etat, I guess you would say. I really want this entity eventually to really make corporate media obsolete, because I think that's where we're headed. The corporate media kind of has their little sugar high now with the Trump ratings, but that's not going to last forever. So yeah, I'm in the funding stages. I've been back on YouTube for about 2 months, youtube.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. Unfortunately, a lot of people weren't aware of that because, as you've so greatly reported, YouTube's doing some interesting things.
Yeah.
I'm doing daily live streams. I'm doing podcasts for my Patreon subscribers. So that's patreon.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. And really just kind of basically doing from the grassroots up, like Bernie said, trying to get the funding, to hire that first camera person. I want to hire other reporters too. This definitely can't just be me. So it's going to take more time than I would like, but it's going well so far. I have two patron channels. I have 750 paid subscribers. Have some people that have expressed interest as far as funding. So for how long I've been back, which is 2 months, I'm very encouraged.
That's exciting. And the first thing when I saw your logo and saw the name for this, I thought, man, why didn't I think about that? Because that is such an awesome name, Status Coup. So I want to
let me tell you how difficult it was to trademark a name. I literally one of them that I wanted. I went down to an attorney's office and tried to muscle him to giving up his client's name because they weren't using it yet, and that didn't go well. But I'm happy. I'm happy with this name. It's definitely what I want.
It's the perfect representation of what is needed in media. And I want to kind of ask you about the content, because we kind of saw two types of reporting from you, both of which I think were great. We saw the reporting where you were on the ground in Flint, Michigan, with the Standing Rock Tribe protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline. But we also saw a lot of political commentary from you on TYT politics. So are we going to get kind of a mix of that, or are you going to stick specifically to like on the ground reporting?
It's going to be both. I mean,
okay.
I'm 31 and definitely feeling it. I just had back surgery recently, so I can't be in the field 24/7.
Right.
That's part of why the real vision is to create a real network with other reporters. I have some people in mind, but yeah, I'll definitely be in the field. I'll be doing commentary. We want to do live events too. A lot of people, they may remember, but when I was at TYT, I did a town hall in Flint last year, just to kind of remind people that this was still a crisis. And I'd like to do live events in other places where, it might be a few bucks to get in, and some of it goes to maybe a charity, some of it goes to us. We have a lot of ideas as far as revenue, but it's going to be definitely heavily tilted towards in the field, because I think we need both. I think we need people like you and Jimmy and Kyle and Jamal and, the entire growing progressive media space. But I also think there's a real hunger and demand for reporters to get out there and actually like cover the non-Trump Russia media industrial complex. So that's kind of where I'm going. A lot of in the field stuff and a lot of commentary and reporting from where we live too.
Right. It's the scandals really that don't get talked about that you're touching on, because you actually you were talking about this a little bit in your interview with Jimmy Dore, but we learned recently that the governor of Michigan basically declared the Flint water crisis over because the studies confirmed that there's no longer lead in the water. Now you have evidence that they're cooking the books. Are you able to talk about that before it's published or give us any insight? Because I think that's a bombshell story.
And by the way, I could literally write a book on trying to get this published through corporate media, because I've had the outlets that have said no, and frankly, some of them are progressive. It's just incredible. I mean, obviously, if people don't think I have the story right, that's one thing. But there's been so many who just said, we don't have the bandwidth to read these 10 pages on Microsoft Word. And I'm like, yeah, but I have evidence that the science is cooked. You sure you can't read that? Or I've had outlets say, like, can you connect it to Trump in some way? I'm like, no, this happened under Obama. I can't. But yeah, so basically, I've been to Flint many times. Obviously, credit to TYT for sending me when I was there. And I always was hearing this one name, Mark Edwards. He's the scientist that first identified the lead crisis in Flint. So he did a 2-year study. It was predominantly funded by the EPA. And he kept on finding and declaring an improving water situation in Flint. But when I was there on the ground, all I heard from residents was they're still sick, they're still getting sicker and whatnot. So I actually did something radical. I actually read his report. Most corporate media, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, just kind of regurgitate what the EPA or state agencies tell them. So I read his report and I realized that he was declaring Flint's water normal based on literally testing 17 homes to declare it normal. When I say 17, he tested 138 homes, but he only looked at 17. He only looked at 34 to meet the EPA's lead and copper rule. And without getting too in the weeds, the EPA's lead and copper rule basically is the regulation that makes sure you're looking at homes connected to lead service lines. So he only looked at 34 homes. He didn't use licensed plumbers to even verify that they were homes connected to lead service lines. And he also based his whole study on a separate University of Michigan Flint study. They did a mapping study of where the lead service lines were all over Flint. I literally have the person who did that mapping study on the record telling me it's very flawed. And he based his. So basically, my report, it's not just him. I look at the state testing because Edwards was funded by the EPA. The state of Michigan, Department of Environmental Quality, they didn't use licensed plumbers either. And they decided what homes to test. And they happened to be in the zip codes that weren't the worst affected. So essentially, there's a lot of selective science and kind of cherry pick numbers to feed the EPA what they want, to basically feed Governor Snyder what he wants, to say, problem solved, let's move on. So they don't have to pay the real amount they need to pay to change all the lead service lines. Not just that, but they have to fix the interior plumbing in the homes. And the problem is, Mike, this isn't a sexy topic, right? Mm-hmm. It's not going to get a bazillion clicks on YouTube, but it could save lives. So I kind of cater more towards doing that. But, I won't name the outlets yet. There's been a lot of outlets that either wouldn't read it. I got Aaron Brockovich on the record. I got water experts on the record. I got plumbers on the record. I got residents on the record. It's not like my opinion. So that's the story. I've held back from self-publishing it only because I want, the people that I'm investigating in it, they could just say, this Bernie bro with his made up science. So I'm trying to get it in a publication that, gives it a little bit more credibility. So I'm working on it. And I also currently am talking to one politician who I might be able to get on the record in the story.
That's great. If you can get it published, that would be amazing. And I kind of understand the logic behind them being apprehensive. One, because it's not a sensationalist story. There's not going to be a grabbing headline. I think it's grabbing to people like you and me who actually give a damn. But it's nothing about Trump, nothing about Stormy Daniels, nothing about Russia. But what you're doing is you're kind of dissecting a study, because these studies, they kind of lend credibility and legitimacy to claims made by the government, but nobody really gets in there and dissects these studies and asks these questions that you're asking. Is the sample size large enough? Are the methods that they used going to give us an accurate conclusion? So it's interesting to me that nobody wants to talk about this. And one thing that I also find, not just that the mainstream media is kind of backing off of Flint, not that they really gave it the amount of time it needed to begin with, but I notice now that there's no presidential election, politicians aren't really talking about it very frequently. Democrats aren't talking about it specifically, who claim to care. So I find it really interesting that we all just kind of moved on from Flint. Meanwhile, the residents there, they still have to deal with this. I saw the video that you posted to Twitter of someone with their water that was still yellow. How can you declare the water crisis over if the water is still yellow? It makes no sense. So here's one thing that I want to ask you, and you may not have the answer to this specifically, but do you think that there will be justice in terms of criminal charges being brought to anyone in Michigan? I mean, I'd love to see Rick Schneider, in prison, but I doubt that we're ever going to see consequences like that. So do you see any hope for justice in any way, shape, or form?
Well, first off, I want to make clear, my story also shows that it's not just Flint. This cherry pick testing is being used in other places. And the scientists that I point out in this piece literally just got a $600,000 grant from Housing and Urban Development to do similar testing. He's
perjured himself, which most people don't realize. He perjured himself in front of Congress. Somebody testified, a state official testified that he actually told Snyder months earlier that there was a Legionella concern in Flint. Snyder says he was told in January 2016. Basically, Snyder lied. I mean, he was told months earlier, but he perjured himself in front of Congress. Literally nothing's been done. I think that, I don't want to shamelessly plug myself. I really think the missing ingredient is aggressive journalism. Like, you need journalists to expose this stuff. You need journalists on the ground to expose this stuff, because the New York Times doesn't care. You want to know how much they care about Flint? Literally April 25th, 2 days ago, was the 4-year anniversary of this disastrous water switch. I didn't see anything on CNN or MSNBC. So there are some of Snyder's cabinet that are on trial now for involuntary manslaughter. Possibly they might. It's in the pre-trial stages, so whether they should go to trial. So it's possible that they will, but I'm not holding my breath on Snyder.
Yeah, he's the big dog that we're all kind of looking at, who really is responsible. If you want to say indirectly, that's fine too, but he's certainly culpable here. I wanted to ask you also about the Dakota Access Pipeline, because I know water has kind of been your specialty here. Do you have any updates with regard to DAPL? I mean, we already know that what they've built thus far, and I don't know if it's fully operational yet, but we know that there's been some leaks. Is that pretty much just a foregone conclusion at this point?
That's interesting. I'm interviewing the new chairman of Standing Rock, Mike Faith, next week. But yeah, the Dakota Access Pipeline, I always say spilled 5 times that we know of, because North Dakota's spill reporting system is a joke. Essentially, the Dakota Access Pipeline or Energy Transfer Partners is not going to report if they have an oil spill. It's only if residents see it. In Texas and North Dakota, it's laughable, their regulations for reporting spills. But actually, last week, there was a lot of activists and talk online that there might have been a spill on the reservation. I held back from reporting on it because I'm not there and I didn't have confirmation, so I kind of waited. Thankfully, there wasn't a spill. But basically, there is still the court process. The Standing Rock Sioux tribe sued last year Army Corps and Energy Transfer Partners, the parent company. The judge has kind of kicked the can continually down the road, saying he needs more from the tribe. There was a victory last year because the judge did say the Army Corps acted illegally in not taking into environmental justice concerns, and demanded that the Army Corps, in concert with Energy Transfer Partners, provide a more thorough, not only an environmental assessment, but an oil spill response plan. So Energy Transfer Partners, from my sources in the tribe, has kind of been dragging their feet. They provided the tribe with information that's heavily redacted, so we don't even know what their oil spill response plan is. It's kind of a pipe. Bad phrasing. It's a pipe dream, though, that the pipeline would actually been stopped. If you know of a federal judge in history that's taken a big oil project out of the ground, I'd love to know. But I do think that there is hope as far as forcing Energy Transfer Partners to come up with an actual oil spill response, making concessions as far as they need to beef up the money towards that oil spill response. But it's totally shocking. And we just saw Energy Transfer Partner, by the way, they've had so many spills that other pipelines, like in the last 6 months, Rover Pipeline going through Ohio has spilled like between 20 and 30 times before it's even up and running. You've had down at the Bayou Bridge, they had issues down there, that pipeline. Now you've seen, it's not Energy Transfer Partners, but you just saw this Wisconsin oil refinery exploded. No coverage on CNN or anywhere really. So there's a lot to talk about with Standing Rock, and there's still battles to come. I mean, you got Line 3 going through Minnesota. You have Keystone. It just came out that the spill that they reported last year, I believe it was double the amount. So that's one of the things with my company. We are going to be hopefully covering the next Standing Rock before it's too late, before the decisions are made. So that's what's going on with DAPL.
Right. I'm interested to learn more as well about the corruption angle, because I don't think that the media, well, not that they report on DAPL at all, but I mean, the fact that the CEO and executives of Energy Transfer Partners donated to Trump's campaign, and one of the first things he did was sign an executive order that basically expedited the construction process and gave them permission to build on, Native American land and whatnot. I think that's a gigantic scandal. So I don't see how, if they want to hammer Trump, there's something right there. But I mean, on my show a couple of days ago, I talked about how MSNBC and CNN, they both had segments about Trump's misspellings on Twitter. It's like, how do you not talk about the real scandals in this country, but you focus on that? So,
by the way, it's not just Trump. So a lot of, some people get a little testy when I use the word fascism on Twitter, but you literally have Energy Transfer Partners paying North Dakota legal enforcement $15 million for the Standing Rock protests. You have Energy Transfer Partners just paid $5 million to Bismarck University, the capital of North Dakota, that university. What do you call that? When a publicly funded police department works overtime to beat the living daylight out of Native Americans and environmental activists, 99% unarmed, in protection of an oil company, and then the oil company pays for their costs. I mean, I wouldn't call that democracy. So that's what's happening. But, the progressive network, MSNBC, is too busy, whatever, Trump had Russian salad dressing, and CNN is, I keep it on just to have fodder to go at them on Twitter, but we're in bad shape when it comes to people being informed, and people, viewers and Americans can't become active against something if they don't know what's going on. And I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, and I don't understand. As you tell me this, all I could think about is how much this sounds like the fucking mafia. How is that not interesting? How is that not something that they would want to cover, where you don't know if cops are compromised? Who's a dirty cop? Who's in bed with Energy Transfer? It's just, it blows my mind, honestly. And I think that this really is part of the media's problem. As you said, if people don't know what's happening, then how are they going to get outraged about it? Which kind of brings it to the topic of your book. Your book is called Corporate Con Job. I know you're releasing it chapter by chapter, which is really smart, because I've been working on a book, but it hasn't come out because I've been lazy as fuck. But I think that your model is actually pretty interesting. So tell us about your book and how many chapters you've released thus far, because I think that is a really smart way to do it if you're lazy like me and you don't want to do it all at once. Yeah.
And speaking of Standing Rock, I just released chapter 7, which is all about my time at Standing Rock. So that people could get. I don't want to complicate things, but just think about it this way. There's 2 Patreons. One is for the book. One is for my daily reporting. The book is patreon.com/Jordan Chariton. The reporting is just add reports at the end. Jordan Chariton Reports is the Patreon for my reporting. But basically, I wanted to write kind of a mix of my experience on the campaign trail with my experience working in corporate media. So kind of like half a behind the scenes, what I saw on the campaign trail, what I experienced in Flint and Standing Rock. I'm actually releasing chapter 8 in a few days, which was all about my, harrowing experience interviewing Hillary Clinton voters the night of that election. That was quite an experience. But yeah, I kind of I would say, blow up and drop the curtain on the corrupt corporate media. One chapter is all about how the media really destroyed Bernie's chances from the get-go. Chapter 2, I'm kind of most proud of, which is kind of my explanation of what really created Donald Trump. It's not Putin. It was actually something Bill Clinton did in the 90s, deregulating the entire media industry, which helped create the rolling escalator, and the reality show. I write about covering Hillary's campaign. One chapter is all about something that got no coverage, the election fraud. Lee Camp and some of us did it, but very little in corporate media. And then I got into standing. I have 2 chapters in Chicago, and it's really just I kind of try to be as personal as I can, but also explaining a lot of things through like here's why I know how they do it, because I worked at MSNBC. For 2 dark years of my life, I worked at Fox News. So it's kind of a mix of both, and really like straight up the funding for both of my Patreons is going. I need to hire a camera person first, and then get a little bit of a travel budget. So all of that is going so I could launch this company.
For sure. Now, before we go, I would be remiss if I didn't ask about the gigantic elephant in the room, because there's a lot that people probably are curious about, myself included, because you did work for TYT. You're no longer with them. I don't know how much you can and can't talk about. I know there are also accusations lobbed against you. If you want to speak to any of the controversies, then, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I addressed it like on my YouTube channel when I came out of hibernation. I mean, there's no other way to say it. There was obviously the worst thing that you could be accused of as a man was aimed my way. It was not true. That's why I kind of, at the time, I came out first to explain what happened, because I didn't have anything to hide. It sucks that, unfortunately, there's always going to be like people who think that, as somebody who, I mean, I was raised by a pretty overbearing Jewish mother who said, treat women right and hold the door open and all that. So like, I'm certainly not perfect, but I would never, ever violate a woman. That's just not who I am. But, it is what it is. That's what happened. I got accused of that. It's not true. Thankfully, months later, the majority of people, it seems, know that's not true. And yeah, obviously, it was a tough time. I wish I could get into it as far as TYT. My hands are kind of tied to get into it for legal reasons. But yeah, TYT, made their decision. I didn't agree with it, but it's Cenk's company and he could do what he wants. I've thanked them for like the opportunity I had because, definitely I have my feelings on their coverage and things like that, but they did. There would be no me at Standing Rock and Flint and all these places without resources, which I had at TYT. And it's to be honest with you, it was in my mindset eventually to go out on my own. I think that for all the good TYT does, I don't particularly think, it wasn't really a priority for them to feature the kind of work that is my passion, the Flints. It was always kind of a struggle to get those kind of stories like on the main show and things like that. So it was my vision to eventually leave. Obviously, I would have preferred to do it on better terms. But I still have people there that I talk to and I wish them well. And life's short, so I'm not really, interested in like bashing TYT.
Right. Absolutely. And I respect that. Yeah. Thank you for disclosing that, because I knew that people would be curious about that just with the return and whatnot, but we're glad to have you back. Definitely excited about Status Coup and how that's going to go. Definitely come back on the show when it launches and talk to us about it. Yeah, we're excited to see that. So can you, before we leave, one more time, plug your Twitter and all the links that we can find you or find info about Status Coup and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. So at Jordan Chariton on Twitter. My YouTube is youtube.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. I'm live every day, give or take like 4 or 5 Eastern time. People aren't getting notified that I'm live, and apparently subscribers are being unsubscribed. You know this all too well. So
yeah,
you got to do your homework. You got to make sure you pay attention to people's channels. So I'm going live every day. A mix of original reporting and commentary. And yeah, I mean, I'm not very good at asking for money, so. Everybody has a choice. You could fund whatever outlet you want. If it's not going to be me, I hope it's Mike or Lee or whoever. As far as for me, I just want to be very clear. There were things put out there. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but there were things put out there about me and money and all this stuff, which to this day, I just kind of laugh at because it's not true. I'm a pretty frugal person. I don't spend money lavishly. So I want people to know the funding that's going to be coming through my Patreon is not, I'm not going out to dinners with it. This is all going actually not only to start the company, but I'm trying to get as much funding as possible in those Patreons to then go to potential investors and say, hey, I've already got X amount of Patreon subscribers. I've already got this monthly revenue, and that's before I've even been in the field. I do have some people interested in funding, but obviously the better numbers, the larger the numbers get, the better. Obviously, I'm not looking for, shall I say, Democratic Party funding or any funding from those sources. Definitely more progressives, and I'm talking to one person who's a small business owner. My reporting, it's patreon.com/Jordan Chariton Reports, and yeah, I can't thank you enough. It's fun I spoke with Jimmy, and I'm speaking with you. It's nice to kind of get back out there, and I will definitely let you know when this Flint piece is out.
Yeah, definitely, because we're all looking forward to that. So yeah, thank you so much. We definitely look forward to seeing the launch of Status Coup.
Thanks, man.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.